Go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our virtual author event tonight. Thank you for supporting us, your locally owned independent bookstore in Books and Books. And as always, we're excited to be here and to be in partnership with Miami Book Fair and Culture Crusaders for this wonderful series of online events. Tonight, I'm especially excited because we're hosting V.E. Schwab, obviously, to help celebrate the launch of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. And she's going to be in conversation with Rebecca Roanhoarse. I can honestly tell you that, in my opinion, I think we have two of the most brilliant storytellers telling stories in the universe right now with us. I love both of their books, their new books coming out this month, I guess. And they'll transport you, intoxicate you, just really help let you break from reality, which I think we all desperately probably need with the state of the world. That's my little gush moment, and I'll read you guys some formal bios. Victoria V.E. Schwab is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of more than a dozen books, including the acclaimed Shade of Magic series, Villain series, This Savage Song, and Our Dark Duet. Her work has received critical acclaim, been featured in the New York Times, Entertainment Weekly, and the Washington Post, and more, translated into more than a dozen languages, and has been optioned for television and film. When she's not haunting Paris streets or trudging up English hillsides, she lives in Edinburgh, Scotland, and is usually tucked into the corner of a coffee shop dreaming up monsters. Our moderator is Rebecca Roanhoarse. She's the New York Times bestselling author of Trail of Lightning, Storm of Locusts, Star Wars Resistance Reborn, and Race to the Sun. She's won the Nebula, Hugo, and Locus Awards for her fiction and was the recipient of the 2018 Astounding, formerly Campbell Award for Best New Writer. Her forthcoming book, I have it here, Black Sun, is out in October, next week actually, and she lives in New Mexico with her family. So, okay, before I hand this over, here are my little button rants. Okay, at the bottom right corner, we have Ask a Question first. This is where you can submit questions. Don't submit them or don't write them in the chat. We can't guarantee they won't get lost there. So use this for the Q&A portion, which we'll moderate in just a little while. And then next to it, our new shiny button is the donate button if you are willing and able to help us keep doors open at Books and Books down here in Miami. I know everyone here with us has already purchased a copy of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue from us, and you're patiently waiting for a shipping note, and we will start shipping tomorrow. We are waiting on the last of the goodies that you're getting with the book. We have everything, and we're going to start ASAP tomorrow. And then lastly, I want to make a little note that if you are interested in reading Black Sun, we will have custom signed book plates by Rebecca if you'd like to pre-order from us. And we, of course, also have the wonderful anthology that they're both in, if you want to fill up your cart tonight. So that's it for me. I'll hand this over and see you in a little bit for Q&A.
Hi.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Very excited for this chat. I'm a huge Victoria fan myself. And actually, Victoria, to get started, I wanted to ask you, do you remember when we first met?
Oh my goodness.
I have the story. Yeah.
Okay, I was going to say, no, you have to tell the story. You have to understand, I don't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday. Also, we spend so much of our time at various book festivals and conferences.
Yes.
Okay, tell the story.
Okay, so we met at Sirens Con in Beaver Creek, Colorado. I think that was probably 2017. And we had all arrived. It was at this ski chalet, sort of in the middle of nowhere, because it was October, so it wasn't ski season yet. It was empty except for us, the con. And so I was a new writer. I hadn't published anything yet. Maybe I published my short story, but I was carrying around, my little ARC that didn't even have a cover yet, and trying to meet people. And I went to the bar. And you and Zoraida were there at the bar, and you were like, come on over, we're having bourbon. And so we sat down, and me, little newbie writer, didn't know anyone, you shared a bourbon with me. And we sat and we chatted, and we had the best time. And I was just like, wow, these people are so cool. They're so nice.
Zoraida's the cool one. The Zoraida's always the cool one. No, I love that. And for some reason, I didn't realize that's the first time that we met.
I think so. Yeah, it had to have been. And then I've seen you a ton of times since then, but that one really stuck with me. Like, what a kind thing for you to do. Like, you didn't have to do that, and I always remember that. So,
Rebecca, I love that that's the story because, like, one, I'm drinking whiskey again right now, and it feels like we're just coming full circle. But also because it has been such a joy to watch your career just like blossom and just skyrocket. And I love that. I love that. And I'm also very envious that it happened over such a short period of time, because in my mind, you've been monumental for years now. And this idea that that was just a couple of years ago, to me, is horrifying, because it means I have no concept of time. But I love that.
Oh, that's awesome. So speaking of time, let me just use that as my segue. Let's talk a little Addie LaRue.
Yes.
So I have heard you say multiple times that this book was 10 years in the making. So why do you think this story in particular stuck with you? Because I know you've written a ton of books in the past 10 years. You're pretty prolific. But why did you stay with Addie? Why did you know this was a story you needed to tell?
That's actually a really good way of putting it, because most people ask, like, well, why did it take 10 years, right? Whereas the real question is, like, why didn't I quit and, like, or drop it and move on to something else? And the weird thing is, if you think about it, when you look at the, like, scope of my career over the last 10 years, the weird thing is that I was writing Addie the entire time, right? So, like, I had all these books in the foreground, and every year Addie was in the background. And I wasn't actively writing it, but I was thinking about it. And I think that in and of itself is the reason I didn't quit. There was something about Addie. The fact that I didn't write it for 8 years, because I drafted it then for a year and a half, is not a reflection of the fact it did not excite me. I didn't write it because I was scared to death of it. So I couldn't let go of it because it wasn't boredom. It wasn't hesitation. The things that were keeping me from writing the book wasn't an uncertainty about the book. It was a fear in my own inadequacy to tell the story. So I kept holding it close to me, hoping that I would get better, that I would be more equipped if I just waited long enough. And then about 2 years ago, and as I was just about to turn 30, so I guess it was 3 years ago, because I'm 33 now, and I have no concept of time, we've established. But a few years ago, I realized, right as Henry, one of the main characters in the story, does, I realized I was going to die without writing this book. I realized that my fear of writing the book wrong was was being overshadowed by my fear of never writing the book at all. But it was never disinterest. It was always fear. And then one fear had to eclipse another one for me to start writing it.
Wow. And because the book is monumental. It's vast in scope and scale. It starts in like the early 1700s, takes us all the way to 2016. So it makes sense that felt like something big to take on. So what were the challenges of writing a book that big with that much sort of like scope that follows that much history? What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, the weird thing is, like, the timeline didn't scare me. The feelings scared me, right? I had to really, like, analyze the 5 stages of grief for a human existence. I was like, how does a person survive? So it wasn't even the idea of covering 300 years of ground. It was more like, I was terrified by writing a character novel instead of a plot novel, because all of my novels were plot novels, like plot centric. And the idea of writing a character story scared me, because I thought, I can't do that. That's a literary fiction thing. Like, that's not what I do. There's no magic. There's no explosions. So I was afraid of that. But really, for me, I didn't have the voice for a couple years, and then I didn't have the ending. And those are really the 2 things, I don't know about you, but the 2 things that I need to start a story. I need to know exactly how it ends in a way that excites me, because that's the thing that's going to keep me from quitting. And I need to know the voice. I tried every voice possible for Addie before landing on this 3rd person present, which is this very weird voice that fit for her because she's trapped in an eternal present, right? She's telling a story, and there's no past and there's no future. Everything is happening in an eternal, amber, fragmented present. And so I found that voice, and then I didn't have the ending. And we're not going to get into spoilers at all in this chat, so don't worry there. But, like, the ending of the book, because of Addie and Luke and what they are, every way I tried it, it kept going towards abusive. It kept going towards endings that stripped Addie LaRue of her agency, endings in which she's the only one that loses, endings in which every ending I tried felt wrong. And if I had written this book at 25, I know the ending I would have written it with, and I'm really glad that I didn't. And so something had to happen where I realized the kind of ending that I needed, because I write my books kind of backwards from that ending. And that took the majority of the time. So yeah, it was a daunting project. But for so long, the weird thing is it was a daunting project in that it was breaking the mold of what my other books were doing. And I thought that was a weakness. I thought that was a sign that I shouldn't do it. Because who was going to read it with my name on the cover if they were used to a darker shade of magic or vicious? And it was only over the course of revision that I realized that like the difference wasn't a difference of like separate plants. It was a difference of separate branches on the same plant. And that was okay, that these two branches could be in the very opposite ends, the difference of the distance between them, and they would still be rooted to me.
Wow, that's
Fear.
cool. And I think some people, fear is a great driver.
Yeah.
I think some people don't realize. Say that again?
I was just, go ahead. You go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, some people I think don't realize that authors are always pushing ourselves, that we're always trying to grow as well. And yeah, sometimes maybe you're not equipped to tell a story, at a certain time. And it does take a few years to get there, to sort of like find your voice. And certainly Addie eventually finds her voice. I don't think that that's a spoiler to say that. But I think what's so cool, and I'm just going to sort of like, say this, is at the beginning, the whole, hopefully I don't think this is spoilery, but, Addie cannot say her own name. And I just thought, literally that's true, but it's also a powerful metaphor. Women not being able to say their own names, not being able to claim who they are, claim their own space. And so I just wondered, how do you think that applies to you? Do you see yourself in this character in any way? I know that can be an annoying question, but I want you to go for it.
I mean, that's the thing, is the reason that my books say V.E. Schwab instead of Victoria Schwab is like a conscious decision based on the sexism in our industry, right? There is a sense that if I were my true self, there are a lot of people who would never pick up my books. And that was a really hard decision I had to make early on, to kind of do a self-erasure in the interest of getting people to pick up the books and engage with them, and then have to deal with their biases afterwards, instead of never picking up the book because my name was on the cover. So I feel that definitely. But at the same time, like, yeah, I really wanted to engage with the idea of female erasure and autonomy. And I think so often when we see Faustian bargain narratives, they're about men. And we see immortal men who like, joie de vivre their way through history, and then get really bored because they've seen everything there is to see, tasted everything there is to taste, done everything there is to do, like screwed everyone there is to screw, like they've had it all. And so then they lapse into this existential ennui because they've done it. And all I kept thinking is like, a woman would never have that luxury. Like even immortal, even without the curse, Addie would not have been allowed to move through the world the way that a man does. And so much of the story becomes about the way that somebody is trying to erase a woman from the narrative, and the ways in which she finds, without ego, without, her identity on it. She doesn't get to scrawl her name on the paintings, but she inspires the paintings, and how like that absence of ego allows her to leave a mark on the world in unexpected ways that a man, I think, would never occur to most of them.
Right. And you bring up art. Art is really big in this book, because Addie does serve as a muse in different ways. And actually, the different sections of the book sort of open with different art that she has been inspired by. So tell me a little bit about why you chose to put art into the book in the way you did, and what art inspires you? What is it about art that you felt like needed to be talked about?
So I have an art and an art history background, so undergraduate in art and then graduate in art history. And so I knew I wanted to have some kind of didactic component, this idea of like, how do we summarize a work of art? But really it came down to Luke, the devil / the darkness / the god of night / an old god, our dark force in this novel. He sees himself as a patron of the arts. He is somebody who helps the arts. And so I wanted Addie to become the flip side of the coin here. Addie is the muse, and she inspires artists and she nurtures them and she cultivates art. And it becomes the way in the narrative that she discovers she can influence the world, because there's a line in the book that ideas are wilder than memory. And this idea is that, like, I was reading, is it Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert? I can never remember the title of this book, but she has a book on writing where she talks about the wildness and the fickleness of ideas. And she has an experience with Anne Patchett, wherein, like, for years, Gilbert had an idea, a very, very specific idea for a novel. Like, I think it's 1930s Panama Canal, right? Like, had this narrative. And for years, she ignored it. And then it chose Anne Patchett instead. The way that Gilbert puts it is like, one day she no longer felt the desire to write that book. And Anne Patchett woke up with almost the exact same idea and wrote that book. And so I was thinking about the, like, manifestation of ideas. And I was also thinking about the fact that as creators, we sometimes can't account for the seeds that inspire our own ideas. Like, we might be able to account for the idea as a whole, but sometimes we wake up with just like a thread and we just have a little, like, I don't know where I thought of that, but I thought of that. And I wanted to play with that idea that what if it was a forgettable component? And what if muses were things that we don't remember? And so Addie becomes a muse, something that we don't have control over, something whose memory we can't retain, but the idea lasts. And in the very first chapter with Addie, she's playing a piece of music on a piano that she and a young musician have been composing together. And she's essentially repeating it so that he's going to keep waking up with this piece of music in his head that he can't place, that he will assume he had in a dream. And so I wanted to play with this idea of what inspires art. And for Addie, that becomes the language with which she gets to move through the world, is through art and through artists. And it kind of becomes her counterpoint to Luke in that way, that he sees himself as a patron. She sees herself as a creator and an inspirer of art. They both nurture art and artists in their own way.
Yeah. And so that sort of begs the question, hopefully we can avoid spoilers, but do you think that Addie inspires Luke?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting, right? So one of the things that I like about this dynamic between the two of them, because I won't call it a romance, it's a very complicated relationship over 300 years that moves through many phases, but they become the only constant in each other's life. And, you know, the devil makes deals and the people don't tend to live very long with those deals, maybe a decade, maybe two. Addie lives forever and Luke lives forever. And so weirdly, they become central to each other's lives by virtue of the fact they're the only ones who last. And I don't think that they inspire art in each other, but they inspire stubbornness. They inspire identity. I would say that Addie draws Luke more towards humanity and Luke draws Addie away from humanity. She has a very slow erosion of humanity over the years that I don't even think she can account for at first. But it's there. It's been 300 years since she was human. So I think they definitely begin to draw each other towards an inextricable center.
Nice. Now, another person the person that I think makes Addie human is Henry.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Henry and how he comes into the story.
So Henry is a young man working in a bookstore, and he is the person that Addie encounters who remembers her, this first person in 300 years. And I will say, as an author, I was terrified of writing Henry, because there's a way in which Henry can become like a young white male millennial who just has the same issue as all young white male millennials, where they just, like, you know, they just don't have their lives together. And then they kind of are just like feeling blasé towards the world, and he could be the worst version of a kind of archetype. And I desperately didn't want him to be. And I was so afraid of writing him that I realized that in order to love him as a character, in order for me to care about him the way I cared about Addie and Luke, I was going to have to make him fragile in all the ways that I was fragile. And so I think one of the reasons that I'm scared of Henry and I'm scared for Henry is that in crafting him, I gave him all of me. I am essentially Henry. Henry is me if I had never found writing. So I went through the exact same. Henry is that kid who goes to school and is so daunted by the possibilities that he never picks anything. And now he feels like he's falling behind. And it's not an absence of passion. It's an inability to choose one path because it means the erasure of all of your other paths. He's paralyzed by the uncertainty of his own life and what he wants that life to mean. I had all of those feelings. And if I had not found writing and if I had not developed this career, I would be in the exact same place that Henry is. This kind of, he's at sea. He's totally lost in his own headspace. And so I really gave Henry all of those softnesses, all of those deeply, deeply human traits that I couldn't give to Addie, because Henry's very sad in a lot of ways. He deals with depression. There's suicidal ideation. He feels desperately lost and alone. Addie doesn't have that luxury, because if Addie had those personality traits, she never would have survived. The whole thing is that Addie can live forever because she's so fucking stubborn, and she's so like spite carried her maybe the first 20 years, but like hope and defiant joy carry her the next 280. I could not give her that sadness, because if she had that inherent sadness, the devil would have won. So I gave it to Henry. So he was a difficult character to create. I know my editor was terrified of him as well, because she's like, I'm sorry, you're putting like a white millennial wall here on the page. I'm supposed to care about them in the same way that I care about the devil and Addie LaRue. And I was like, I'm going to make it happen.
And you did make it happen. Like, Henry's amazing. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I feel like very sad for him all the time, but I love him deeply.
He's like a little baby bird, and you just want to protect him.
He's the like the definition of a cinnamon roll in the dictionary. Yeah. But I also think, the important thing to remember is he's our only human. I mean, his friends are human, obviously, but in the tripod of these three characters, he's the only human, and he's 29, and he's at that age where you just feel so alone in your new adulthood.
Yeah, but I think maybe it's that fragility that makes him sort of powerful, that makes him remind Addie who she is, and like gives, so this is not, I saw a review that said this was a romance, and I'm going to agree with you. That's a little, I would say that's a little too narrow, right? Yeah. But we're talking about, I think, bigger ideas, but I understand like why they thought that. But in this sort of relationship triangle, like Henry is the one that keeps both of them sort of human in a way, because I think he influences Luke as well. Like, hopefully not, I don't know how to talk about that without spoiling it.
No. But what I will say is this is an interesting aspect of the book. And if anyone has seen the piece of artwork that comes with the book, I think you might have gleaned this. Henry and Luke look a lot alike. And that is because Addie has a type, and Luke, the devil, was designed in her image, like in the way that she wanted her lover to look, her future love of her life. And after that happened, she still gravitates towards people who look this way. And so she's gravitated towards Henry as well. Yeah, I would say that like it's very much a triangle in which each piece influences the pieces to either side and across the way. So maybe that makes it a star. I don't know. But yeah, these are three characters that I needed their lives to feel inextricable from each other. They are all guided on very specific paths. I really hope that people love Henry as much as I do. I think all I could do to help them do that was to pour as much love into him as I could.
Yeah, it shows. It totally shows.
I know everyone's just going to be in it for Book the cat. I just want to point out there is a cat in this book. The cat is named Book. Nothing bad happens to the cat. Like, the cat is perfectly happy every single day of its life.
Very important. So I do want to step back a little bit. The book starts with the line, "A girl is running for her life." Like, wow, okay, that is an excellent line. But, Addie's running both from something at that point and towards something, throughout her story. And so I just wondered, do you identify with that at all? Is there something that you like sit in, your identity that feels like you run from it, or that you're running towards it, or is it your entire life, just like Addie?
I mean, I definitely run from stagnation. I think that's the thing, right? That drives a lot of the characters in the book is this fear. Like the way it's phrased for Addie is that she's scared of being born and buried in the same 10-meter plot. And I would say that I have a lot of physical movement in my life, but it's because I'm terrified of like emotional and mental and creative stagnation. I have a very hard time sitting still. Let me tell you, this year has been great for that.
Oh,
But no, I definitely, Addie is so unlike me in her personality, but she is very like me in that core sense of like, I can't stay here. I can't sit here. I can't just like, I think what it is I fear contentment. To me, contentment goes hand in hand with complacency in my own life, for better or for worse. Because of that, I have such a hard time with contentment. I like need to search for those highs. I don't want to feel anything at a 5. Like if I feel something at a 5, I don't know how to sit with it. It needs to be a 10 or a 0. Either extreme feels like living, and that neutral zone feels like waiting for something. And I feel like Addie is of that same ilk. And so the irony, though, is that wasn't the original first line for the book. Originally, the first line for the book was, "This is how it starts." And every section of the book started with the sentence, "This is how it starts." And each section of the book was slightly a different beginning of somebody's story. So like, because Addie has kind of lived multiple lives. And so in my mind, the first line of the book is, "This is how it starts." And every time I go back and like think of the first line, I assume it's that. And then when I went to post the first page of the book today on Instagram, I was like, oh my God, that really isn't actually how it starts anymore. But in my mind for so many years, it was just, this is how it starts. So yeah, I do think running is a physical act that indicates fear, and I think fear is the driving force of so much of this story.
wow. So talk a little bit about maybe these different iterations that you've had over the 10-year course of sort of creating Addie and creating the story. You said it started a little differently originally. Like what are some of the ideas maybe that you entertained and then decided to throw away?
I mean, it only got better, I think, because it was an idea that needed to steep. It needed to get that depth of identity. And, in the beginning, like Luke was very much not a human. The devil was just the devil. He didn't have a lot of the humanity that I gave him by turning him into an old god, because the whole idea is like a god with a capital G has to be infallible, has to be perfect. And in so doing becomes really unrelatable necessarily. It's God. But when you take a god and you turn it into like polytheism and you look at pantheons, and I mean, I feel like you know this from your own work, like polytheism like allows pantheons, which allows gods to be fallible, which allows them to be made in human images. And gods then with the lowercase g tend to be fickle, stubborn, jealous, resentful. Like they tend to be the worst of us as well as the best of us. I wanted that for Luke. I wanted Luke to be a petulant child, right? He is the devil and he is absolutely a petulant child. So he didn't start out as the petulant child. He started out as this kind of grandiose concept that sure is like sexy for a page, but had very little depth to him. Addie started out with a great deal more sadness and ennui. Like Addie was tired, and I understood that fatigue, but I had to realize over the course of writing and revising that fatigue would not sustain her, that she would have given up, that she had to have a fundamental difference in her personality than I initially wrote her with. Because I initially wrote her like me, as I do, because I'm a narcissist, and as I'm writing for myself for very long periods of time, I'm just like, who do I need to see? And for me, like, I would have been very tired and very sad. I got the original idea for this book while on the very top of a hike in the Lake District in England, when I was exhausted and sad and cold and alone. And I thought, and there was nobody else around, and all I could see was nature. And I thought, how tiring eternity would be. Like that was the thought that entered my mind. That was the initial iteration of Addie, was somebody who is so ready to lie down and sleep. She just wants an excuse to sleep. And so the two fundamental differences really were Henry becoming interesting instead of like a placeholder for humanity, Luke becoming much more flawed instead of just a dietic figure, and Addie becoming hopeful. It's weird to think of that in retrospect, that for like the first 8 years in my mind that I carried her with me, she wasn't hopeful. She was just tired.
Yeah. Well, I think I understand that feeling. I think we all sort of feel that way right now. Right. That you feel like you could just lie down and take a very long nap, but we have hope, hopefully.
Yes.
Too.
It's a stubborn kind of hope.
Yeah.
Rebecca, it's a stubborn hope,
Even against facts.
you know?
So I did hear that Addie is headed to the screen.
Yes.
I think that's public, right? I could say that.
Yes, yeah, it just got
Okay.
announced last week.
Excellent.
4
Congratulations.
years in the making.
Wow.
4 years that I've had to sit on that secret.
Wow. Yeah, publishing is great.
I know, right?
So, and you wrote the screenplay yourself. Is that correct?
I did.
Wow.
Yeah, which is, I mean, a beautiful experience that I absolutely loved, and now feel like I probably would want to adapt most of my work, just because I thought I would have a lot of fear and like uncertainty about how to translate one into another. And it really was about detaching the mediums and saying like I'll say one of the biggest differences in the film script from the book is that Henry has a completely different career. And Henry has a completely different career because Henry in the book is an extremely internal character in a way that does not translate to film. That's just, so all of the emotional beats are the same, and a few of the like the structural frameworks of character are different. But I loved it. Like, I had the best time looking at how to make one story told 2 ways. It was hard, but I loved it. I wrote it during the, I almost said during the apocalypse, during the pandemic.
That's correct.
During the lockdown. I wrote it during the lockdown.
Wow, excellent. So I'm going to get to people questions. Oh yeah, so maybe we'll do that. Let's do that first.
Let's do it.
All right. I see we have a
that way
lot.
I can chuck them back at you, because I want to listen to you answer these things.
Oh gosh, no, that's okay. So I don't know if we have a moderator who wants to do it, or we just want to pull them up. Okay.
Okay. All right. We have a bunch here. I've been looking at them. I'm going to start with something really easy, which is what brand of whiskey are you drinking?
Oh, why, thank you for asking. I'm a little concerned because this is only day 2 of tour and it's down to here, but Sarah Marie Griffin, who's an amazing Irish author, sent me Writer's Tears, which is an Irish whiskey, and this is a Japanese cask finish. Ooh. So this is my tour whiskey. I'm not sure it's gonna last all 12 tour stops. I need to slow down.
Or get a second bottle.
I mean, it's a beautiful bottle, and in my defense, it is 12:30 in the morning here. So, not that I need an excuse, but yes, highly recommend the Japanese cask finish.
It's the apocalypse.
It's the apocalypse. I do what I mean.
Okay, so I'm going to start with this one. You kind of talked about it, but I think this is a different question. It's, how do you go about crafting the first line of a novel? How do you try to set the tone of the story from the beginning, from that beginning line? This is from Erica.
I love that question. I'm going to make Rebecca answer first because I'm really curious. Like, are you precious? Because I'm insanely precious about first lines. Do you feel precious?
Yeah, I obsess with them. Yes. And I'll revise and revise until I get the exact correct one. Yeah, I'm obsessed. They're very important.
Do they stay? Do they stay?
Yeah, once they stay. Yeah, once I've got it, I know. Once I could feel it. Like the opening line for Black Sun is, today he would become a god. His mother had told him so. And I think that just sets up my entire story. Like that's it, that encompasses everything. If you understand what that's about, then you understand the driving character, you understand the protagonist. So
exactly. I am extraordinarily precious about first lines and endings. I cannot write the book without I know exactly how it ends and love the ending, because it's going to keep me from quitting along the way. And the first line, I will spend days, if not weeks, on that first line. I come from poetry, like that's my background creatively, and I feel like the first line of a book is a poem that is then telling you the story of the whole book. Like that first needs to be indicative. So, like, you wore a very peculiar coat, to like the night Kate Harker burned down the school church. She was neither drunk nor, I can't remember that first line, but I love that line. To this one, which is a girl is running for her life. Like, I love first lines. I think that they are beautiful, kind of object art unto themselves, and I judge books when I don't love the first line, which I
do too. Terribly and unfairly, but yes.
I'm like, you had one job, guys. You had to make a good first line. Like, people will be like, oh, it's not about the first line, it's about the book. And I'm like, but the first line is the book. It is the book. It's like the way of judging.
Yeah.
I know a lot of readers who, when they're trying to decide what to read next, they read first lines.
Me too.
Me
too. I get sent a lot of things for blurb, and I fully admit that, like, I will open like the 10 documents I've been sent that month for blurb. I will look at the first lines and I'll decide where to go from there.
Yeah. Nice. So the next question I have for you is, you've said before that there is a piece of you in every character you write. What piece is that for Addie, Luke, and Henry? I can't see who wrote this one. Oh, Kevin.
Yeah, I put myself into every book. Like, some authors will have an avatar character, but I don't espouse that idea. I think I break off a very small piece of my personality, whatever it is: fear, ambition, hope, drive, who I want to be, who I'm afraid I am, and then I grow a whole person out of that. So they're not similar to me except for that seed. For Addie, it was the fear. Like, it was fear of stagnation. For Luke, it was like hedonistic adoration of art. And like, Luke, the devil has a kind of an awe of artists, and he's not an artist, and he wants to be closer to artists, and so he sees himself as this patron. And I think I want to understand art better than I do, and I want to be closer to it than I am. So it's almost this desire to like create and control and be that tiny god and feel like you're responsible for the art. I want to, even when I write books, I feel like I'm not responsible for the thing it ends up being. It's like some other force came in at the last draft. And then for Henry, obviously, all of the anxiety, all of the depression, all of the sense that my life is moving too fast, and no matter what I do, I can't catch up with it. Rebecca, do you put yourself in your characters?
Absolutely. Yeah. Same thing. Nothing is an avatar. It's like little pieces of myself that go into each character. I think for Trail of Lightning, Maggie was all my trauma. So I just put all the trauma in. She's much braver and much more sort of in your face than I would ever be. I'm just like the little, like, hurting person inside her. But that's definitely there. And yeah, for Black Sun, it's got 4 point of views. It's a big, massive, epic fantasy. And each one of those characters has a little bit of me in them, a little bit of what they're all searching for home in a certain way. And so that's really like, thematically what I'm trying to do with that. But like, there's different sort of experiences of what it was to lose home and what it is to find home in each character.
Can I just ask you real fast, like, because I love Black Sun so much. I like everybody, if you have not already pre-ordered it, please go do yourself a favor.
Thank you.
But when you're writing multiple point of view characters, I know, like, was there one that you felt most protective of? Like, I ended up feeling most protective of Henry. Did you have one of the 4 that you felt most protective of?
Oh, I think off the top, Serapio, definitely. Yeah, he's the one with sort of he's the one whose mother tells him he's going to be a god. And so, yes, he really had my heart and my sort of little, like, this feeling when I wrote him. But I think it really changed to Shala to a certain degree, because she's sort of like out there. She's the rowdy one. She's getting drunk. She's hooking up. She's kind of like flying through her life. She's not sure. She doesn't really have a plan, and all her plans tend to end with her like broken in jail. And so you just want to like take her and like just shake her and tell her to get her life together. But she has a destiny and she just hasn't found it yet. She's just floating. So when she meets Serapio, when that happens, that's going to be the explosive sort of relationship that pushes them both, in a radical direction than what they had thought, and than what they expected.
I love it.
Yeah.
You're getting lots of like Black Sun love in the chat.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you everybody.
So the next one I've got here is from Terry, and it's, I once heard an author say that her characters got up in the middle of the night and rearranged the story while she was asleep. Do your characters do that to you?
I am the god of my world. No, I'm seriously. If my characters surprise me in a big way, it's because I've done something wrong. Because like, I am the control factor, right? Like, I plan my books pretty extensively. I start at the end. I rewind from the end to find the start. I like have a strategy. For me, because I have such bad anxiety and like fears of creative ineptitude, the way that I handle that is by having a plan and then executing it. So for me, creative joy is executing a strategy, not discovering a new one. No, my characters do not get up and do shit. Like, they don't do any of the work for me. I would be very grateful if they would do something, even if it was rearranging the book. No, I don't like to be surprised in that way. I like to be surprised by little moments. But like, if my characters got up and started doing structural rearrangement on me, I would have a cow. That's not where my joy comes from at all. I am a hardcore planner. Rebecca.
Yeah, I think I'm closer to you than I am like the more pantser version. I tend to have an outline. I tend to know what's going to happen in the small moments, like maybe in a dialogue moment or maybe in a reaction moment while I'm writing. I'll be like, oh, I didn't know she was going to say that, or something like that. But as far as like what she's going to do and where they're going to end up, yeah, no. I'm in charge.
And I will say it gets worse the more books you write. Like, I used to be like a vague outliner, and now I'm like 20 books in and I'm like strangle holding all of my, I'm like, you will not move from this spot. Like, I just want you to stay put until I get back to you tomorrow.
Oh, I love it.
Okay, this next one comes from an Addie. And she basically asked, how did you come up with Addie's name? And the longer form Adeline, it's mine as well, and I've never seen the exact spelling used in anything I've watched or read.
This is the weird part where I break everything that I just said. I am a complete religious planner, except when it comes to names. Names are like a spiritual experience for me. Half the time they just come with the story. Sometimes they have a significance that I figure out as I'm planning the story, but sometimes the name comes with the character as I'm just starting to figure them out. And once a character has their name, I can't change it. Like, and I'm running into this problem now with one of the books in Threads of Power, which is the next arc in Shades of Magic, where I have a main character and I can't figure out their name. So I can't write them. And they're like a very important character, but I've gone through like 6 names and none of them are right. And they're not sticking to the character. Like, it's like the wrong pieces of Velcro, like the 2 sides that are the same. So I can't start writing once until I have that character's name. Once I have that character's name can never change. Like, it's just, it would be a psychic bond break for me. I wouldn't be able to write them the same way, but I have no idea where those names come from. Like, which is making it super problematic for me trying to figure out this name for Threads of Power, because I just think the characters come with the name. Lila was always Lila. Kel was always Kel. Addie was always Addie. But I will say LaRue is because, like, I did want her to be like this idea of the road or the threshold. And so, like, she is always walking on this path. So LaRue was always there for that. But Addie, nope, I have no idea. But I love it.
I do too. It's a beautiful name.
It's a diminutive, which is what I like about it. Like, it's a name that somebody would not call her. It's a name she calls herself.
Oh, nice.
So this is a bigger one, I think. Where do you start when you're creating a new world? What is the foundation for your world building process? From Sarah.
Ooh. That's an amazing question. I can't wait to throw this to Rebecca. Actually, Rebecca, you answer first so that I have longer to think about it.
Oh, no. What is my world building process? You know what? I start with character. I often know who the character is before I know their full world or what I need to put into that world. So Black Sun actually really started with Shala. And I knew who she was. I knew she was a captain. I knew she was sort of adrift, literally and emotionally. And so I sort of built out. So I built, sort of the Teak society that she comes from, which is the sort of siren, all-female island dwelling society that she's been outcast from. And so I knew what that was. And then I knew I wanted to, inspired by Mesoamerican indigenous cultures. So, I looked up the Maritime Maya and everything sort of expanded from there. So I don't keep big notebooks of like worlds. I don't have like, massive amounts of world building before I start. I world build on the fly around the characters, and then hopefully I take really good notes so that I can write book 2 and I know what the hell I'm talking about. But we'll see.
I love that because I am the exact opposite, which is my favorite thing. It's my favorite thing when authors have different strategies because it just proves that there's no right way to write. For me, like setting is the first character. So like when I sit down to write, I sit down to figure out the setting and the rules of the world in the most innate and intuitive way possible. So regardless of how complicated the magic system I'm making is, it's about how do we distill this down. I like to call it the anime school of world building, which is like everything needs to be contextually relevant to the characters. Like every detail of the world building needs to intersect the characters and the story and the conflict. But also I want to know how the world is made. And the reason for that is because I write primarily about outsiders. I need to understand insiders in order to understand what makes them outsiders. And in order to understand insiders, I need to understand the world that they fit cleanly into. So the world that insiders just fit naturally with, flow parallel with, is going to be the world that my outsiders fit perpendicularly with. And so to do that, it becomes like this everything I do is reverse engineering process of like, what does magic look like? What are the rules of Addie's curse? What are these kinds of really innate intrinsic principles? And you can build really complicated systems, but I believe that the best way to build a complicated system is out of a very simple foundation.
Nice.
Yeah. So this one I like because I think it's an interesting thing to think about. But how did you become so comfortable being so open and sharing everything you work through as an author?
I love that question.
Risky, that's how.
Deeply uncomfortable all the time and still decide to do it. No, here's the thing. So I don't know about you, Rebecca. I started very young. And when I started in publishing, I was 19 when I got my first literary agent. I was 22 when I sold The Near Witch. And at that time, the early days of social media, nobody was honest. Nobody was open. And the only transparent, like the only thing that you got from everybody was success. You just got like their good news, just wave after wave of good news all the time. And I was struggling so much with my first book deal and my second book deal. And I just felt so alone with all of it. Because I'm sitting here feeling like a fuck up, part of my language. And like everyone else just seems to be cheering on all their foreign deals and all their hoorays and all their good times. And I went to a writer's retreat really early on. And as we sit around the table, everyone's complaining. Like everyone's being so honest. And all I could think was like, screw you guys. Like if you had been honest online, I would have felt so much less lonely. I would have felt like I wasn't messing up. I would have had such less doubt. And so right there and then, it was like 2011, I made a decision. I was like, I can't control a lot about social media, but I can control the way I engage with it. I'm going to choose to be as open and honest as possible about the creative struggles, about the emotional struggles, because like, if that helps the younger version of me or the newer version of me feel less alone with whatever it is that they're dealing with, to know that like a new author and then a mid-list author and then an established author and then a best-selling author, any iteration of me, knowing that I still struggle with the exact same things I struggled with at 19 and 22, if that keeps somebody from quitting, if that makes somebody feel less alone in this game, like I'm worth being, I'm willing to be uncomfortable. So the answer is like, I'm not comfortable sharing everything that I share. I make the decision to share anyway, in the hopes that it makes somebody else feel less alone, because I remember how intensely lonely it was.
Wow.
But it's totally uncomfortable all the time. Like, I don't like sharing all of that all the time. It's just like, but I've gotten enough feedback from other people that like it helps to not feel so totally alone in this game.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the whiskey at the Sirens. It's like understanding that, like, it's that moment where you don't feel alone, when somebody makes you not feel alone, and you think like, oh, maybe I do deserve to be here because I don't feel like a failure just because I have doubts and I have feelings and I feel like an imposter. Like, we all feel like imposters. And I'll be super honest, early on, like I got flack from other authors who were like, don't do that. Like, don't show that side of it. You're going to bring everybody down. You're going to ruin the vibe. And to which I was like, screw you all. Like that's how we got here in the first place.
Right.
That was from Erin. She's really happy.
Sorry, Erin. I have a lot of feelings about this, obviously.
So, Miriam asked, do you always have an idea in the background the way that you had Addie? And are there other stories that keep simmering and growing all the time while you're working on other things?
Rebecca, I want to ask you this first. Are you a one story writer, or like do you simmer?
Yeah, I simmer. I actually have to have 3 or 4 things going on. So like right now, yeah, I have the second book after Black Sun. I have a short story I just turned in. I'm in a writer's room for a TV show. So there's a number of different things I sort of need to have going on, and they all feed into each other. Like they all, even if they're not the same idea or the same sort of even concept, because like one's like sort of conceptual sci-fi and one's like high fantasy. It just keeps the brain going, like the engine going. It's feeding the creative engine. And so when I stop on this one, I can work on this one, and when I get tired of this one, I can switch over to this one. And if I only have one project at a time, I get bored. I start to wander. I start to be like, well, what's on TV? Maybe there's something else I can do.
I call that creative procrastination or productive procrastination, right? Which is like, I'm going to avoid this project, but I'm going to do that by working on this project.
It's very effective.
I love that. Yeah, I need back burner ideas at all times. Anyone who's followed me for any length of time knows I refer to the 6-burner stove metaphor, which is this idea that I keep one story on high heat and I keep the other 5 on low heat. And I kind of need to have things simmering because I've learned to trust that back burner part of my brain. Your brain does amazing things when you're not looking. Every time I left Addie to steep for a year and came back to it, it was richer and it was better. The book that I just finished, which hasn't been announced yet, but I've been calling Secret Garden meets Crimson Peak. Is like a way dark one. And I can't tell you whether it's middle grade YA or adult because I can't figure it out for the life of me. Like, no idea, which I'm so sorry to my publisher for that. But I left that story for 4 years and it needed 4 years. It needed 4 years to just keep steeping and keep turning. And so like so much of writing is trusting the parts of your mind that are working when you're working on other things. And yeah, I need that. Now, I don't always need to have as many things as I have now. Like Rebecca, I'm in a writer's room and I'm working on Threads of Power, and I'm working on The Extraordinary comic, which is set in the Vicious world, and I'm working on Vicious 3. And when I say I'm working on, I'm not actively typing on most of those things, right? I'm simmering. I'm opening the pot lid every day and seeing if it needs more water, more salt, more anything else. So I need to have those back burner projects because some days I can't think on the high heat project, and I just want to spend some time with a low heat project.
Right.
God, I love extended metaphor. Like it just brings me.
I know, you're very good at it. Are you a writer?
I love it. I love it.
I think people just freaked out about your
about Secret Garden meets Crimson.
So I think we're actually coming up on an hour. So I'm going to ask 2 more questions.
Okay.
Trying to decide.
You know, it's so hard. There are so many good questions. And thank you everyone for asking questions. It makes this so much fun. I know it's not an in-person event, but it's like a beautiful thing to get to have this kind of conversational format.
Yeah.
Everyone's being super lovely. Right? But I think I'm going to do it. We kind of talked about this, but I love hearing stuff like this from authors. Is there a line in literature that has stuck with you throughout your life? From Erica.
Ooh.
Big question, but
I have a quote, but it's not a line of literature. It's a quote by an artist. And for some reason, I carry it with me all the time, which is Vincent van Gogh. And it's, I know nothing with any certainty, but the sight of stars still makes me dream.
Wow, nice.
And I carry that with me into like all of my life.
Wow. I think for me, it's probably like a half a dozen Toni Morrison quotes, but probably the one that always I come back to is, if you don't see the art or the book in the world that you want to read, then go write it for yourself.
Is that Neil Gaiman?
No,
Morrison.
In the room? Yeah, no, that's Toni Morrison.
Okay, so this question has the most votes, and as a bookseller, I definitely want to hear you guys' answers. So what books have you read lately that you think that we need to add to our TBRs immediately?
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, Black Sun, which I just finished like 2 days ago and is absolutely wonderful. And also our books look very beautiful side by side. So I'm just saying, if
They
you
do.
organize your bookshelves that way, here, I'll tell you the book that I've been recommending all year. And it's interesting. I love this book and I'm sure I would love it in any year, but something about this year just made me need this book, which is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, which I describe as like putting on a big gay sweater, like a big gay cat sweater. It's beautiful. It's soft. Nobody's lives are in danger. Like in that way, it's a very wholesome book. It's got so much heart and so much feeling, but I feel like in this totally shit-tastic year, it was a book I didn't want to end because I just felt a little warmer and a little more comfortable and a little happier and a little safer while I was reading it.
Nice.
I've heard that.
I'm going to go with Legendborn by
Ooh,
Tracy
yeah.
Dion. Yeah, that's a YA out. And, sort of billed as a retelling or a retooling of the Arthurian legend. But it's really about grief. It's about a girl who loses her mother. And she's protagonist. She's Black. She's lost her ancestors, sort of her history and how she goes about reclaiming all of that. And the magic system, I thought, is really creative and really interesting. There is like sort of a love triangle, and she just did it so well. And she just used sort of that metaphor or the trope of the triangle to like do really cool things with the Arthurian story, which of course has its own inherent love triangle. And so I just thought it was very creative. It was taking something we know, but putting a brand new spin on it in a way I'd never seen before. And then bringing sort of new threads together, bringing in the Black experience, making it very American in a very specific way, while keeping sort of its Welsh roots. That was very cool.
I love that. What about you, Christina?
Oh my God. I mean, these two for sure.
A plant in the audience.
I've also, what did I just finish? I finished The Project by Courtney Summers. I love her. It's horrible though. It made me cry, but it's really good. I loved Legendborn. I think one of my favorite books of the year is Grown by Tiffany Jackson.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a thriller.
I can't wait to start it.
So good. That's probably my favorite book of the year. I'm going to go ahead and shout out our local authors, Maika and Maritza Mulit, who have a book coming out in January called One of the Good Ones. I could go on forever, so I won't. But
I'm taking notes.
So I want to thank you both for spending time with us tonight, and of course the audience for being active, asking questions. The chat there's more questions now. So sorry guys, we're out of time. But this
was so joyful.
Sincerely, your books are my favorite of the year. So this was such an exciting event for me to have on our roster, and I'm so glad we got to do it. You're welcome.
Thank you for having me.
This was such a delight and such a pleasure.
Good to see you. So what time is it now for you, Victoria? 1 a.m.?
1 a.m.
All right.
1 a.m. I know. I just want to thank everybody for coming and doing this. It's an unconventional event in an unconventional year, and this is such an important opportunity to support bookstores. And so thank you to Books and Books. Thank you to Rebecca, and thank you to everybody who came and hung out with us for an hour. This is just, I can't think of any better way to celebrate.
Yay.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Tor.
Bye-bye.
Have a wonderful day /night/morning. I don't know what time